Usually get caught off when it says preparing the stream. It usually means we're already live. So with that, where are we here? All right. There we go. All right. We are live, brothers and sisters. So who wants to start? No pressure. Who has a question? All the events, all the activities. We got some newer brothers and sisters in here as well. I know we were just talking to Randy before going live, and Randy's newer to the ministry. We got some of our well-known faces that have been around for a while and names. So that's always great to see. Keith, Ray, over in the in what is it, in Virginia, is it? There we go. Ray in Virginia. We got Roy in New York, Cindy, Michael, Liam's in today. All right. And BB and Keith. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, it's just kind of a free for all. I think the last few videos there's been a lot of depth, a lot of stuff that just has us scratching our head and saying, is this really it? The evidence is there. I don't, there will obviously still continue to be more teachings. We'll continue to tie in more things and bring in more clarity and continue to strengthen. But we've been looking for this moment that's coming here in a month, and we've been focused on it for a year. I have no reason to doubt it. I just get nervous about it. I was telling my wife the other day, ah, it obviously it's pressure. You know what I mean? It's everybody knows I haven't said a thus saith the Lord, but the understanding and the revelation of everything that's come, the weight that it feels, not a burden. It's never a burden. But the weight, I just I just walk around kind of gloomy sometimes. And every once in a while you get those days you just kind of walk around, just quiet. My wife knows, and it's just one of those weighty days. And so I figured instead of having another day or two of those weighty days, it'd be nice to have a nice live show and get some faces on here and just chat, hang out, answer questions, and let people share things that don't need necessarily an answer from me. Maybe others can share on things, though obviously I will answer along the way. And if there's any lull in the conversation, I know there's a couple things that people had asked for clarity. Generally, we know them, but some that might be a little bit newer, or how do you answer this? How do you show this to somebody? There's a couple of those things too. So with that, who has a question? Who wants to say something? Anybody? Anybody? All right, so I'm just gonna have to
Hey,
start it
I'll
then.
say
There
something,
we go.
Elaine. Good evening, brother. How you doing?
Good to see you, man.
Hey, you too, man. Listen, I just wanted to thank you for your diligence and your steadfastness and your unending ability to put out videos that I can't even seem to watch in my time. I'm still watching the last one. It took me. You put out the other one. I was only like a third through the last one, but yeah, I work up here. You mentioned that I work in I'm in the DC area, and I've been in the Intel field for about 40 years now. And I can tell you, man, I can tell you all out there, there are things happening you wouldn't believe. Things I can't talk about, but major movements of major military uh, organizations around the world are being pre-positioned and moved, and uh, it it's all lining up. And I know we've all said it's going to happen at a certain date before, but there are definitely there's definitely things. I was just at a picnic with my church family life group, and there's a special forces guy in my group who works up in the Pentagon, and he was telling me, of course, he can't be specific either, but but I can go into work tomorrow and I know where to look for certain things to look for, and even if I
Mhm.
found it, I wouldn't tell you what it is here.
That's right.
But I can tell you guys that things are happening all over the world right now,
Yeah.
and it looks like things will start happening here in just a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So
Oh, excuse me.
uh, you're scary sometimes, man.
The timing is pretty crazy. Yeah, we remember that excuse me, I think a number of you have seen that clip. I shared it in one of the teachings as well. Who is it? Was it the Serbian prime minister?
Yeah,
Yeah, Serbian prime minister, and
yeah, the
he
Serbian,
figured
right?
there was
Yeah.
right. He had said just 2, 3 months ago, he was saying, we got about 3 to 4 months. Um,
Hmm.
Russia and Ukraine wasn't going to be settling down. He was in talks with Xi, and said there won't be anything subsiding there till for sure past the end of the year. And then he said, something for sure within the next 3 to 4 months. People would definitely start to get it. Yeah.
Well, there's just things that have been happening for the last 4 years that we all, that will make little flashes on the news for a short period of time, and then they disappear and nobody ever talks about them again.
Yeah.
But yet those things have already happened. And for instance, I was just thinking about how just it was 4, maybe 3 years ago when when did the Russia thing kick off? It was 3 years ago, right?
About 2.5 right now, I think.
Next,
Yeah.
yeah, it's about 2.5.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah. October. No, that's Israel. Yeah, about 2.5. Yeah.
yeah, so wow, think about that. That's the same time that the whole war will be going on. So remember when the U.S. was transporting tanks into the Balkan area through Greece,
Hmm.
and we put something like 2 to 3 thousand tanks in
Wow.
that area, and they had to travel up about several hundred miles to get to whatever staging area they're in. I don't know if they're in Poland or
Hmm.
or where they all went to, but we forget that little things like that have been going on for
That's
a
right.
long, long time. It's not,
Yeah.
and now you're just hearing, you hear on the news, you might hear that, oh, we're sending them this missile system or these. Um, and it wasn't that long ago that Biden green lighted the use of contracted personnel within
Hmm.
Ukraine, as
That's right.
advisors, just like Vietnam, advisors and whatever.
Excuse me. Yeah.
But contractors also include people like Blackwater and operators,
That's right.
our de facto army.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's all kinds of stuff happening. So
Yeah.
hold,
And no
buckle
subsiding
in,
looking.
Buttercup. We're about to go, have a fun time.
That's right. It's what what got me a little bit kind of just feeling a little bit blah today was a video, excuse me, about the when I say the air quotes with prophets, because there was that one guy who put out a word like 3 or 4 months ago that he had seen Trump, a bullet pass by his head. He went down. He would have prayed when he was down, and his eardrum had blown. Well, I don't know. I don't think Trump's eardrum had blown, but definitely his ear got clipped, and we all know the story.
Yeah, he said he
Well,
would also convert to full Christianity. That, and I don't really see that happening.
Well, and that's
But
the thing, right? Did he? Didn't he? We don't really know where his stance is, even though he stands for Christians. But, um,
yeah,
you know, it's
or
it's what he then goes on to say afterwards. Then the election would come. You know, but what do we know?
mm,
If
yeah,
if he talks about the election and then Trump comes, so this is the part that it tends to get you to scratch your head, because that was quite the word. for something like that to have happened and buzzed his ear. And I mean, we
Well,
saw that.
he could convert. You know, we did used to have a saying when I was in the army: there are no atheists in foxholes. So once
Exactly.
a bullet whizzes by your ear, it makes you realize how quickly you could have been snuffed out. So
Exactly. But
yeah, he might. I don't know. You're right. We don't know.
yeah. And it's the other part though. I mean, if the elections come and then he says, that it would be this revival in the air, and you're like, wait a second. We already know prophetically that you can't have a revival in the Laodicean age. You can have maybe little pockets. So is it that the Lord maybe allowed him or gave him that vision, but the rest of this stuff he's trying to interpret is he doesn't understand the events and how they play out in tribulation. So he's not aware that it is tribulation. But I often have a difficult time, and I've for a long time, even still, trying to understand how there would be an election in America.
Yeah.
Once the tribulation, tens of millions of people vanish, craziness breaks out, Israel is attacked, the Lord is here, and things will settle down in the 40 days when he comes back. But, you know,
And you think about it
settle
took
down for
you
an
seven
election in
years.
November? I don't know.
It took you and us 7 years to figure all this out. Well, Satan and his angels aren't stupid. They've probably known exactly how it was going to go out for a long time. And it makes you wonder how many in government also
Yeah.
already know the timeline. So,
Yeah. And
here we go.
that's something to wonder too. I mean, because we've seen that video from 2010, some of those guys
Yeah.
really deep behind the curtain, they've been trying to do it for a long, long time. Maybe the enemy knows the time frame, maybe he doesn't, but maybe he knows the time frame, and these guys trying to push it and push it and push it was them thinking they could make it happen at any time, but the enemy might still know they're pushing it makes it happen at a specific time, which is in the Lord's time too. But
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and the timing, it there's no getting around the 50 above the 14 years, and it does start at the Feast of Trumpets. So, you know, that portion of knowing what we do know is undeniable, and that's why the nervousness really starts to kick in now. That's why that edge of our seat, putting something like that out there, even though everybody else is able to study it and seek it and search it out for themselves and understand that, hey, this is the revelation. You could see it, it's all there. But the rubber meets the road here in 29 30 days, right? So and if it's not, what then what? Then I'm gonna say, oh, wait, everybody another year. I don't know, 7 more years, 14 more. I have no idea after this year. I
Well,
couldn't I
all I
couldn't give
know
you
is
something that the Bible
I've got
has, right?
August 12th written in my cubicle, and
What's
then
that?
below it says it wasn't aliens. So
Perfect.
anyway, I'm gonna back out of here and let other people yap. I'll see you later.
Perfect. Thanks, brother. So yeah, it's there's somebody who has heard and understood some of these things in the military aspect of it, and the movement. For us regular folk, we don't often hear knowing truth or things like that going in the background. We might get little tidbits here and there, but it's always hard to understand and discern what's true and what isn't of what's going on in the world behind the scenes. And so it's nice to have a brother that can share with some of that stuff too. So, um, anybody else have some questions? Anything they want to share? Doesn't have to even be a question. It could just be something they want to share. What did I see? What about you, Randy? What about yourself? Where are you? Are you American?
Yes, I'm down here in Florida.
Down in warm. What is it now? The mugginess that you have to walk outside with a sword to cut through all the humidity.
Right now it's raining, so it's pretty nice.
Oh, there you go.
That was here today. 90 degrees, probably about 90% humidity too.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Better than cold weather.
Yeah, exactly. I hear you. We obviously being in Canada, it was really cold and we've been hot for the last about 10 days now, coming up on 2 weeks, and we still got another week or two. It's been really nice. And you always listen for those people that are going to complain about it being too hot now. There's no complaining about the heat when you've been complaining it was cold for so long. So no, we'll
Exactly.
take it all day long. Yeah. So
Exactly.
what was it with you, Randy, when you came to the ministry? What was the first video, or did somebody share it with you, or what happened?
Oh, I honestly can't remember. It was back around Hanukkah when I was watching a few of the other people and just things just wasn't clicking. And
Mhm.
uh, I don't know, God showed me that to tarry and wait.
Mhm.
So that was back in December, January time. It's like, wow, okay,
Okay.
tarry and wait. And I just kept, and then somehow or another, I came across your channel. And just ever since, just things have been clicking, just unbelievable. I mean, a lot of it's more personal that God's
Mhm.
shown me things and just it just lines up almost it's unbelievable how it lines up.
Yeah.
That it just things and that he shows me and how he shows me. And I mean, I don't like sharing dreams, but I've had some amazing dreams and visions, however, but I feel like they're more personal. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
share them.
Yeah.
But because a lot of people like go off the deep end when we start saying dreams and stuff and how they line up, but it's just
Yeah.
amazing how they line up. Just
Yeah.
um, and then watch some of your teachings where it's like, oh my goodness, that's exactly what where I was at that point.
Mhm.
So and just confirming things. So anyway,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, that's exciting.
I'm all in. I my family's kind of like, yo, you've been saying this forever. I was like, well, I've been thinking forever, but this is the first time that I've ever had so many confirmations.
Yeah.
Well, I hope I'm right this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope we're all right this time. I remember that too with our brother James. It's similar in the sense where he had said with him too, it was just so many confirmations, and if James wanted to jump in or not. But yeah, he'll send me messages sometimes, and he's like the confirmations, like I probably over 100 confirmations now, over the past few years with the ministry. It's similar in that sense with yourself, just you're understanding whether you're having dreams or you're having visions, and yeah, they're personal, but there's it's one thing to have it be personal, but then whether you're watching something or something happens and you're understanding that connection with it for what was shared with you personally, um, the power in that is a big deal for sure.
Yeah,
And
it's completely amazing.
yeah. And with a lot of people, they do take it too far where they think they should go start a YouTube channel and start sharing all of their dreams like it's meant for everybody. And I think that's where a lot of people get into a variety of issues. Um, you know, some should be, some shouldn't be, right? And I think the vast majority are personal, and people take it too far. So no, it's great, man. I'm happy you're here. Happy the Spirit led you, and there's a connection that you've seen with what's been happening to you too. So that's great.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, I see our brother Robert jumped in. Mr. Bushby, my fellow Canadian. Hey, Robert, are you coming to Calgary on August 11th or 12th for a coffee? He's been, I think, the last couple of years, he's come by July or August, and we end up grabbing a cup of coffee and saying hello. And he tours a little bit with his wife, so that's always nice to see. There he is.
Hey,
Hey, you coming out to Calgary, Robert?
hang on a second here. Just trying to get my. Oh, there we
Oh,
go.
there you are. What? Oh
Ah!
my goodness, what did you do? For those that don't know, our brother Robert had this big, full gray Santa beard, probably down to his belly. Oh my
Almost.
goodness. When did you do that?
Oh, a couple weeks ago.
Wow, what brought it about?
Oh, lots of things. I'll tell you if I ever get out there.
Oh man, it looks good.
Thanks. Yeah, it looks
You
a
look
little
like a
bit.
different guy. Oh my
I am a different
goodness.
guy. What can I say? Yeah, we are going camping right away, but we're not coming out till in the middle of August sometime.
Oh, okay. So we'll just meet you before that.
Well, I said we didn't. I don't know if I saw that we were gonna, but if you brought it up, maybe we might. Who knows?
Oh, no. I mean before that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Who knows? I still kind of think that we're not going to make it, but whatever.
Yeah. No, we definitely if you're not coming till mid-late August, yeah, we're not going to be meeting each other here, no.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Maybe at a banquet meal.
Yeah, absolutely. In the lower end, maybe,
That's right. That's right.
Cool. Yeah, I've been really enjoyed that your last video. It was awesome.
Oh, thanks. That one kind of freaked me out a little bit too. And just certain things, especially even catching every part of that last one really had an impact. But even to hear others give a word and they don't understand it, and we know exactly what's being said, what precisely is taking place, how it applies to the beginning, who this group could be a part of, not only us, but a part of. I mean, it was pretty wild. I love stuff like that. That helps boost gives us strength and everything else, right? And then to have seen, knowing for those, especially those who have been around for a little while, or have tracked with the sun being off by 2 months. If you've tracked it, if you've understood it, if you've followed it, I know for some it could be a little bit tricky to track because we are living in a 2 month off. The Lord is doing it in the 5th and the 7th month on the Hebrew calendar, but to the Lord, it's like the 3rd and the 5th. It's and to have seen that only in 2024, it lands exactly 2 months to his 40 days. I mean, I had left that piece on the back burner, kind of like I did. If you guys remember that have been around for a while, in Zechariah chapter 7. So Zechariah opened up to us with Hosea back in about April or so of 2018. And then we started getting, all right, Liam, then we started getting the 5th and the 7th and tracking all of the 5th and the 7th, but nothing there was nothing that you could do that I was understanding that anybody had understood to give a count to get to the 5th and the 7th, trying to understand the feast of weeks and all that stuff. It just wasn't making sense. So it ended up on the back burner. It would come around once in a while, but not too often. And then boom, it was connected. It was there, and we had it. The sun, moon, and stars, the wheat harvest, all of these things. And that one in Psalms, though, with Psalms 19 at the circuit of the sun, it just seems, well, how are you gonna that's not really gonna connect with anything. I mean, the circuit of the sun, based on where everything is, if that's really connected, and we've got these chapters to years in order, and I mean, we've gone through them so many times, and it turns out there is a Psalms of Ascent and all these things. It just I couldn't figure out what was going on until it just dawned on me. Wait a second. June 20th, August 20th, 2 months. Oh my goodness. It is exactly 2 months off as to where it should be. And I just thought, oh, that's got to be that cherry on top to just say,
it was about
get
3
ready.
years. It was about 3 years ago that we were working on that 2 month off thing that was we were doing.
That's right. Yeah, you did that little chart for me too, that little graph, right?
Yeah.
Because the issue was always about, is the Lord trying to show us with what the Spirit gave? Is the Lord trying to show us that no, everything is from Taurus and that's where it should be? Or is it kind of a, how could he do that, right? How could he do that when really the sun is over here? And what we eventually come to realize, and the harvest showed it, the sun is showing it, all of it is showing it, is that hello, Roy, is that
hey, I wasn't sure if I was live or not.
Yeah, you're there. We got you, brother.
Yeah.
Is that
Stellarium? Yeah, Stellarium. You proved that
everything
out in spades. Yeah, you proved that out in spades. That's Stellarium.
But what did we need? We needed to still understand, that it is, and this is why I'm bringing it up too, because there are people that still have had issue trying to see it. Meaning, well, wait a second, is it the 5th and the 7th? I mean, you go to Zechariah 7, and you're telling us the 5th and the 7th, but then you're going to the 3rd month, which is Sivan in June, and you're saying that's where God is counting the beginning. well, that's the third, and this is the fifth, and this is the seventh, but you're saying this is the first. It's like, no, it is the third, the fifth, and the seventh, but to the Father, it's the beginning. And in the end, that's where the beginning will start. That's where the count will come from. And when it was revealed, when we understood it, all of the final little pieces that were put aside came to light. And the final little piece that I hadn't even considered for a while, just bang, exactly 2 months. And that, like I said, it was such a cherry on top, because that one thing from the Holy Ghost, that one thing the Holy Ghost only had to give was right on target. And that would open it all up, because my point was I was going to delete that video in my prayer. I was going to remove that video if I didn't get a confirmation of 50, and then I was understanding I was on track with these things. And boom, there it was. And I thought, okay, it wasn't the date and the timing, but whatever that was in there was necessary to understand. And of course, it was noon and the Taurus and everything else that came from it. Without that, we could have never found where the beginning was going to be. I wouldn't have even considered with the wheat harvest of winter wheat compared to spring wheat. I would have thought, well, what is winter wheat being harvested here for and being observed over here, yet the start of the year is over there? I mean, it just didn't make sense.
Yep.
Until another piece, another piece, another piece, another piece. And now right down to that final little piece, I don't have another piece that I know of at this point that I can say, well, now let's add this to the mix. All of it's there. I was thinking actually of doing a video. Maybe it would have had to have been a 3-part one, or I would go quickly through some and just go from Genesis to Revelation and just hit key points that we did in Genesis to reveal prophecy, hit key points in Exodus, hit key points in Leviticus, hit key points in Numbers and Judges. I mean, you want to talk about all the books that we've gone in through and how they've played out in revealing prophecy. I believe it's just about every book. Just about, if not every book. We've brought about the prophetic tie-in to the end, just showing that within every book is the story of Christ, in every single one of them. Sometimes in chapters, even.
I like the way you frame it, Alan, though, where you conceptualize is not the right word, but where you frame it that the wheat harvest can't happen until like July, August, and the grape harvest can't happen till later on. I think that's just amazing.
Mm-hmm. I agree. That was such a big deal. And even when we were starting to understand it a couple of years ago, it would line up with the 5th and the 7th. But there was those other pieces, how do we get there? Even though we were working, like Robert was saying, on this 2 months off, we couldn't, it just, there were still parts and pieces missing. But once it all came into place, and you realize, because if you go to where Nissan is in month 1 now, I mean, yes, it is there now because that's where the sun is now. Excuse me. So that is the Passover and everything else. But when you understand, and as we dug into with wheat, I mean, clearly from Deuteronomy 16 and then going to Numbers 28 and seeing when you put the sickle to the wheat, I mean, it's putting the sickle to the wheat. It's undeniably impossible to do that in March and April. It's just starting to bud out of the ground. It's impossible. And then we showed videos of people around midish late June that have started their wheat harvests across America for their winter wheat. I mean, it was so clear as to how it came about, but it was almost impossible to understand how to put it together starting in Nissan. We needed the revelation of the beginning. It was necessary. And once we got it, where did it land? Not because we made it land there. It was the revelation of Taurus being the beginning and understanding that this would take place from a count of wheat, that when we did that count and we did the 7 Sabbaths, Are you kidding me? The very next day after the seventh Sabbath is the 9th of Av, and
Yeah.
then 50 days come to an end, and it's the first of Tishri. It was
Alan?
exactly the 2018 revelation of the fifth and seventh month, and it was all there. That's why I say now, I know that with as much certainty that that is the time frame of the beginning of it all, as much as
Yes.
I know the revelation of the Gospels in the 14 years.
When when
Now,
when when Joseph said to his parents, his mother and his father, right, when they were talking about the dream that Joseph had, where were the wheat sheaves bowing, right, during the wheat harvest,
that's
right?
right.
It all begins in the wheat harvest, and
That's right.
they didn't like it. It all begins with the wheat harvest. It just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Al.
Yeah. It's, so what it, excuse me. So what it really leaves is the question of this year, right? So that's kind of the issue. And I don't even want to say an issue because I don't even think it's an issue. When I was talking about this again, man, my wife, I thank my wife. I thank the Lord for my wife all the time. I always have. I've got such an awesome wife, and she listens and she's patient. She takes it in and she understands and she'll bounce things off. And because my roller coaster of emotion over the years, and then her just being able to grin and bear it as I go along, is this conversation we had yesterday or the day before about, and I don't know if I had this with Roy or with somebody else recently, where if you take, like, what would you say, Keith, that you know of in all of the studies that you've done, or pastors and so forth that you've listened to, what would be the earliest believed time of Jesus's birth? What would you suspect? Like, we understand it was 2 BC and then the whole 1 BC and so forth from conception to birth. What have you heard over the years?
3. Well,
3 BC?
2 or 3 BC, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them, like even uh, 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 uh I can see his name, Jonathan Kahn.
Mhm.
Jonathan Kahn and many would say 6 BC. So if Herod was 4 BC, I think it was, so they would say 6. So I would tell my wife, what if we took 8 BC? 6 to 8 BC. Or you take where the church has it as a year 1. What if it wasn't even year 1? And we say, okay, we'll go to the furthest out, 3 to 4 AD, where people might have him on the other side of that's where his birth is in an AD calendar count. So from 8 BC to 4 AD. And then hash it out, because is there anybody that believes the birth of Christ was anywhere outside of that time frame? No. In fact, 8 BC is fringe to nobody, and 4 AD is fringe to nobody. So we're in that window right there, which means, what would that be? 20, 22 AD and to 23, and Jesus is beginning his ministry and doing these things up to, 32 AD, 33 AD, Jesus starting to do his ministry. Well, nobody believes it quite to that extent on that side. But now when you ponder these things out, everybody would be in agreement that between 25 AD and 35 AD, Jesus' ministry was in that time frame. So if you take all those that believe the other Herod that died in 4 BC, and you would say that Jesus was born in 6 BC, and you take that forward, well, you would be in Luke chapter 4, you would be Jesus beginning to be about 30, would be about what, 20, 24 or so AD. So you'd be in 24 AD, which means if you do the count from that to our present time frame of when Israel came to be a nation, and you count a Jubilee from that, well, we've only got then 9 years or so where compared to where Jesus was declaring the Jubilee in Luke chapter 4, we would only then have about 8, maybe 9 years before the Jubilee of tracking that count of when Jesus would have said it in a 6 BC birth. We would only be about 8, 9 years away. Well, that's impossible in a 14-year revelation. So that doesn't make any sense anymore. Even if you go to 4 BC, it doesn't make any sense, because we can understand the revelation of the 14 years. It's not maybe, it's not kind of, it's factually proven in Scripture. So that eliminates that side. Well, then you've got the other side. And you could say, but if he was born in year 0 or year 1, like the Catholic Church might say, well, then you might still have another 2 or 3 more years to go. And if you do that, let's say, okay, we got, instead of 3 BC, or I guess 2 BC, and you go to 1, you got 3 more years. Then we say, okay, from 2024, we got 3 more years before you've got the 14 years to equal the final Jubilee, because everything would be pushed out 3 more years. And you could say, see, so we got maybe potentially 3 more years. No, we don't. You want to know what equalizes the whole thing? When Israel came into the nation, came into the land. When we see everywhere the revelation of the 70 years, from Jeremiah to Daniel to Psalms to, it's all over the place. And when we go to Psalms 90 and 10, and we see that it's 70 to 80, and it's pain, travail, sorrow, tribulation, then soon, a short period of time, about 6 months, and then we fly away, like Revelation 12:14, which is 3.5 years. Well, then you've got 10 years, 6 months, 3.5 years. You got your 14 years there. We all know that it's connected to 70 years ending. So in all of the revelation that we've showed connected to 70 years coming to an end and the tribulation starting, and it's from when they came into the land, certainly everything before in a 4 AD, 6 AD, 8 AD, BC would never work. All of that is long gone. It doesn't line up. It doesn't add up at all. But if you go to the ones that are beyond the 2 BC birth of Christ, and you're going into, the 1 AD, and you're saying, we got maybe 3 more years to go. And then the 14, and then that would be the Jubilee, everything being off 3 more years. That couldn't work either. Because you know what? We have Scripture. We have Scripture in Leviticus chapter 19, 23 through 25, when you come into the land. There's only one time in the prophetic history of almost 2,000 years, and it would be more than 2,000 years because they were already in the land for hundreds of years, which means it's been well over 2,000 years since there would be any count of when you come into the land. And when they come into the land, we understood how to count it with the kings. We understood how to count with the 5 years. And guess what? We're in that year right now. If you added 3 more years to the back end, you would be 78 years. There is no biblical account that says when you come into the land, do these things with it all equaling 8 more years. It doesn't exist. So when I'm as confident as I am in the revelation of the Gospels in the 14 years that are a fact, and I say the revelation of the 50 days of the 5th and the 7th, and that it was a process that began in 2018, I am as confident as that as I am as in the other two. But what about the year count? Well, the only time frame that equals the count would be a 2 BC to 1 BC birth of Christ, to him making the declaration of Luke chapter 4, when he declares the Jubilee, being that to 28 into the 29 AD, giving a Jubilee count from there. And guess what? 15 years from Feast of Trumpets this year, the end of 14, and then the 15th year is the Jubilee on account from that count. It's the only one. It's the only one that equals a count with Leviticus of when they came into the land, knowing that they're the house of Judah, how to count with the house of Judah, and doing that count equals this year right now. So I should be just as confident. We should be just as confident in being able to declare this is absolutely the year without a thus saith the Lord. But to me, I think it's almost a thus saith the Lord. It's his word, right? The only problem is we've been wrong and we're human and there is no thus saith the Lord. So we still get a little bit tentative and nervous and shy. But the evidence is so overwhelming, and everybody can go search it and seek it in the teachings themselves to see if it's true. And it was freaky wild. Tying all of that together with the last video, to see how all that was connected, it was crazy. It's so exciting. It's nerve-wracking. You know, nobody quit their jobs yet. You know, you don't sell everything you have. You wait for the Lord to give you the instruction. It ain't happening yet. You can imagine my wife and all this, right? She's been bugging me for years. Oh, so can I quit my job yet? Can I quit my job? I'm like, no, you'll work there right until the time, honey. Because then all the people that know you and know what I do and the conversations you've had, if you vanish while you're at work, it'll be a testimony to everybody there. She's like, yeah, thanks. What else we got? Anybody? Somebody got something? If anybody has something, please, please don't be shy. Just jump in. I'm going to share my screen because there was one brother that had asked about when people, and it's a great question actually to understand, to be able to share, because a lot of people, when it comes to sharing any type of prophetic understanding with others, especially from the ministry here, the issue that everybody comes to is nobody knows the day and hour. Nobody knows the day and hour. And that's always the number one issue. So for that brother, I'm not sure if it was Jerry, forgive me if it wasn't Jerry, that was asking, it's the revelation of the Gospels. So we know the pre is Luke, the mid-trib is Mark, and the post-trib is Matthew. But what had happened is in Matthew, and the same with Mark, and Luke for that matter, because everybody goes to Matthew because that's where they've been taught, without going too far down into all of this, because that's where they've been taught, they for some reason, they fail to recognize that Matthew 24:29 says immediately after the tribulation of those days with the coming of the Son of Man. And then they come down here and they say, but of that day and hour knows no man, it'd be as it was in the days of Noah. We all know this very well now. But what people don't understand is that in Luke, Mark, and Matthew's discourses, not one of them is his pre-trib taking, his mid-trib taking. The third one in Matthew is his post-trib return, but it's not a gathering of people. So at no point in the coming of the Lord in Luke, pre, Mark, mid, Matthew, post, not one of them is the Lord coming to take a group of people away. Not one. They are the comings of the Lord. And in Luke's discourse, it's his coming to begin his 40 days as the Son of Man. In Mark, it's him coming at the end of the 6th year of seals that we see in Revelation chapter 6, at the end of the 6th year of seals, when they see him coming and everybody's freaking out because we know they're seeing heavenly Mount Zion. So when we come to Mark's here, and we see this coming of the Son of Man in Mark 13:24, and we see him coming in the clouds. This is where everybody's freaking out at the end of the 6th year of seals. Excuse me. We also see in verse 32, but of that day and hour knows no man. Now, when we understand that the end of days absolutely will begin on the day and hour no one knows, whether it's this year, 10 years, 100 years, I believe it's this year. I'm not trying to extend anything. I do believe it's this year. When the 50 days are over, the 14 years of the end of days will begin at the Feast of Trumpets, the day and hour no one knows. Now, when you go to Luke's discourse, you see nothing about the day and hour no one knows. And the reason you see nothing about the day and hour no one knows, though we see the Son of Man coming in a cloud, it's because we know that the revelation is the 50 days from the 9th of Av until the 29th of Elul. So Luke's portion that's being spoken about in his discourse, I don't even know. Well, it is in part really the whole 50 days, but it's more about the 40 days is really the focus. And it would begin from the 16th of Av until I believe the 26th of Av. That is the main focus of Luke's discourse. So even if you want to say it's the whole 50 days from the moment of the pre-trib, and then the 50 days begin and they end on the 29th of Elul, there is no day and hour connected to it. There's nothing to do with him coming at a time that's day and hour that no one knows, because the day and hour no one knows is a direct reference to the Feast of Trumpets, the day and hour no one knows. So in Luke's, you're not seeing any of that. We know the pre-trib happens that at the end of the 7th Sabbath, which is the 8th of Av. So right before the 50 days begin on the 9th of Av. And then, so if we go to Luke's discourse and we come down to the bottom part, 21:34 through 36. In 36, when we see the watch ye therefore and be watch ye therefore and pray always to be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, to stand before the Son of Man. This is the pre-trib verse right here. And that's why I say, in a sense, Luke's discourse is all about the 50 days, but the focus is about the events as Jesus, as the Son of Man, comes in his warning for the 40 days. So what ends up happening is you see nothing in Luke's discourse about the day and hour no one knows. But what does he tell us? He told us, so don't be overcharged with suffering and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. So you don't have any reference of not knowing a day and hour, but that you had better not be caught up in the cares of this world, or you won't recognize that day. So it almost seems like in this, you would be able to recognize the day. And so now we go to Mark's discourse. Now with Luke's discourse, the 40 and that 50-day portion comes to an end. We get into Mark's discourse in Mark chapter 13, and his now officially begins the 14 years, as we know, at the red horse rider in Mark chapter 13, verse 8, when nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. That is the red horse rider time. And when the 6 years of seals come to an end, and we see the Lord at the end of the 6th year of seals coming, it's this coming right here that we read about in Luke 13:24, and he's coming in the clouds. And then it goes on in verse 32 to tell us that it's the day and hour no one knows. Well, why is that so perfectly fitting? Because the tribulation of the red horse rider, the 14 years, begins on the day and hour no one knows. So when Luke's portion of his discourse, that 40 and 50-day total, is over, the red horse rider is released with that attack on Jerusalem that causes them all to flee. And the place where I officially would say it's the beginning of World War III, with the attack and destruction of Jerusalem, it starts on the day and hour no one knows. So exactly 6 years later, which is the end of the 6 years of seals, and we see at the end of the 6th seal, the Lord coming and everybody freaking out. Well, what do we know about it? Well, we know from Mark chapter 9 in the previous video, not the last video, one of the recent ones, they will have seen him come, but they're not going right away. They'll see it coming. And this verse right here from Mark 9, verse 1, is the literal end of the 6th year of seals. When they're seeing him come and they're hiding in the mountains and rocks fall on us, this is what they're seeing coming. The kingdom come with power. And then what do we see? After 6 days. So what would be after 6 days which in prophecy is after 6 years. That would be when the Lord is coming. As we had seen, the coming of the Son of Man right here. They're all freaking out in verse 9:1. And then here he is, of that day and hour no one knows. So what comes after 6 days or after 6 years? If you did 6 years and you go from the Feast of Trumpets, 6 years later, you end on the 29th of Elul. So somewhere in this late time frame, maybe even the last day, which would be like Mark 9:1, 6 years later would be the last day of 6 years right here. What would be after 6 days or 6 years? Feast of Trumpets. So in Mark's discourse, when it says, but of that day and hour no one knows, it's the Lord on heavenly Mount Zion having come at the end of the 6th year of seals, and right at the beginning of the 7th year of seals, it's the day and hour no one knows. Now, you've got the 1 more year of seals that takes place, 144 sealed, the great multitude rapture. Then you've got the 7th seal. Then we get to trumpet judgments. And in trumpet judgments, well, if it started at the Feast of Trumpets, 6 years come to an end, and after 6 is the Feast of Trumpets, which starts the 7th year. Then you've got the 7th year from Feast of Trumpets to Feast of Trumpets. Now you've got the 7 years of trumpet judgments of the 7 trumpets. And when does it begin? Well, it begins at the Feast of Trumpets. And so now you've got 6 years of trumpet judgments and the events that we know of. And what do we see? We see immediately after the tribulation of those days. So it means immediately after the 6 years of trumpet judgments. And what happens immediately after the 6 years of trumpet judgments? The Lord is returning feet down on the Mount of Olives. So if it's exactly 13 years later from when everything started, just like after 6 was, and the after 6 year, which is a total of 13 years of seals and trumpets, then he would be coming to begin the 14th year on the day and hour no one knows, because it would be the Feast of Trumpets. And that's why in that previous video, before the transfiguration, when we go to Matthew's transfiguration, you'll remember this. It was such a wild revelation, that one too, with everything that came before Luke's, compared to 1 verse before Mark's, compared to Matthew's, no verses that come before it in the chapter. And how does it start? After 6 days, which is after 6 years, which means, just as we showed with Mark, we see him coming at the end of the 6th year, but then it's the day and hour no one knows after 6 days, which is the after 6 years, which means the start of the 7th year of seals is also the day and hour no one knows, Feast of Trumpets. And the after 6 days of Matthew is the after 6 years of trumpet judgments, which is a total of the end of 13 years, which means when the Lord is coming and returning feet down on the Mount of Olives as lightning from one end to the other, he's coming when? At the Feast of Trumpets. It will happen at the Feast of Trumpets, which is why we see in Matthew's discourse in verse 36, but of that day and hour knows no man. And then what was a huge clinch that just confirmed all of this? Only Matthew's discourse has the day and hour no one knows. I mean, sorry, has as it was in the days of Noah. Luke's discourse doesn't have it. Mark's discourse doesn't have it. Only Matthew's does. And now we've revealed what that means. Matthew's discourse having it is because there's the final 14th year. The Lord has returned feet down on the Mount of Olives on the day and hour no one knows, because it's only a 2-day event. And the days of Noah are 1 year and 10 days long. Why 10 days long? That's how long it was with Noah's story. But why 10 extra days? Because on the 10th day is the sounding of the shofar for the final Jubilee. And that only happens in the 49th year, which this end of 7, this final 7th year, is the final 7 of the 49 count, which means when this final year as Noah is over, not only is it the 49th year in a count, it's the end of it's the final 14th year. And when it's over, 10 days later, there's a shofar blasting on what? At Passover? At Hanukkah? Nope. At atonement, which is exactly what? 10 days after the day and hour no one knows. That was the additional evidence that proved even that final 14th year was him returning feet down on the Mount of Olives from Feast of Trumpets to Feast of Trumpets that final year. And 10 days later, bang, the declaration of the final Jubilee. And then all those that were hidden in the wilderness, remember at mid trumpets, 10 and a half years into tribulation, in Mark's discourse, they're going to flee into the wilderness. Or in Revelation 12:14, they're on the wings of an eagle, taken for a time and times and a half for 3.5 years. They don't come back until it's over, which means what? Which means in Matthew's discourse, at the coming of the Son of Man, when he came at the day and hour no one knows, to begin the 14th year, it had nothing to do with him gathering a people to him. It's him bringing the day of the Lord, which is the year of his vengeance. At the end of Mark's in Mark's discourse, on the day and hour no one knows, it wasn't him gathering the rapture group. It was him coming on heavenly Mount Zion, and the rapture isn't probably for another 7 months. And when he came in Luke's, there was nothing about day and hour no one knows, but we know it's the revelation of the 50 days that come first, and we understood it's 2 months off from his birthday, Isaiah 9, Matthew 4, and what did we find out? The period of time is where the sun is exactly off this year by 2 months, and he's coming for 40 days. Again, when he comes to start his 40 days, there's no day and hour in this case in Luke's, but on top of that, it's also not the pre-trib because the pre-trib already happened. It's him coming to begin his 40 days. So in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, at no point do any of those things mean anything about a taking. At no point. So it's pretty wild to track and see that. And that didn't dawn on me till just like over the past year, when that piece specifically, that I realized there wasn't the pre, mid, and post don't happen at the events of him coming in a cloud in Luke, in the clouds in Mark, and on the clouds in Matthew. At no point were those a taking or a gathering. That was interesting to realize too. Hey, who's Mr. iPhone? I recognize that face. Who is he? The white golf shirt spotted with the mustache. What was the name? Here, let me unmute you.
Your fish shirt.
Is it a fish shirt? There we go. There you go.
For
You're
me?
unmuted. Yeah, there you are.
Oh, all right. How
What's
y'all
your name?
doing tonight?
Good. How are you, sir?
Hey, Michael Pavelic.
Ah, that's
Yeah.
it. I recognized that face earlier from today.
Yeah, yeah. I've been listening. I've been watching your teachers for about 4 years now, and
Oh, nice.
before when I first started watching it, I was kind of like, 14 years, and I didn't really. But the more I listened, the more sense it made, and so I just kept listening and listening, and everything just kept adding up,
Mhm.
and I've always been open to learning new things. I've been a Christian since I was about 8 years old, and then of course got away from the Lord and got back to Him after that later on in life. But everything that you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it just opened my eyes to a lot of things that the Bible has always said that that a lot of like Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they kind of contradict each other in ways. So there's a reason for that.
Mhm.
It was just it was meant for different people, different groups. So it's been a real blessing to learn and to be underneath your teaching and learn, and hoping and praying that these last days are going to be full of excitement for all of us guys.
That's right.
I'm looking forward to it.
That's right. Ready to work if he calls it, right?
I'm ready. If he calls me, I'm ready.
That's right.
And it's a lot that we're going to have to give up. If we are
Oh,
called,
absolutely.
it's not just it's something that people really need to think about and make sure it's something that they really want to do, because
That's right.
it's gonna mean giving up, everything that, every part of your life, and it's gonna be total dedication to what God has called us to do.
Oh, absolutely. It'll be, we have similarities in, of course, in the New Testament with what these guys gave up and putting their lives on the line and everything else. Um, it's going to be all of these modern luxuries compared to what they had in those days. All of the everything. It's not, there won't be anything that's yours anymore. That's it. It won't matter what you have, what you had, your family. I would trust that the families will be taken, and it's going to be nothing but serving the Lord in understanding, with power and with authority, with what these guys had, even amplified, because it'll be a time like wasn't even in their day, right? We've talked about
Exactly.
that quite a bit, right? So there has to be even a greater amount of power and authority given, because we're talking about 8 billion people being dealt with, and in all the events that are going to transpire from all of that, as Scripture, Mark's discourse, we talked about it, Mark and Matthew. You go to Mark's discourse, and World War III, and I've said this before in different teachings, that World War III, we're revealed in Scripture that is only the beginning of the end. That's just the beginning. It's called destruction and earthquakes and war and all of that stuff is called the beginning of sorrows. World War III is called the beginning. And when you wrap your mind around World War III only being the beginning of tribulation, and then when the beast takes over with his power mid-ish, 2.5, 3 years, whatever, into tribulation, then it says now you had better flee. So no, you didn't need to flee during World War III and all the craziness, but now get ready to run, because it'll be a time worse than ever on earth since the beginning of creation until that time. And I don't think any of us, even who have studied these things, I don't think we really can wrap our minds about what that really means. And so the power and the authority and the understanding that the Lord is going to give that remnant group, the power and the authority that in miracles and so forth, the power that the Holy Ghost will give at Acts 2.0, it's going to be something I have such a hard time, because I don't know how we can wrap our mind around it ahead of time. Excuse me. I think the best we can do is just prepare our hearts, prepare our minds, and when the call comes, say, yay or nay, Lord, we're with you.
Yeah, it's so hard to wrap your head around all this stuff. I was brought up, back in the 80s and 90s, with some of these churches, the prosperity message and all that stuff there, and I knew God had called me into the ministry, but I never fully got into the ministry that I feel like God had for me to do in the past. So
Mhm.
I'm hoping, that at this point in time that this will be what God has called me to do.
Yeah.
Because I broke away from that, not really going along with a lot of the teachings of the past, because
Mhm.
it just didn't seem right,
Yeah.
So just, I'm part of your group. If God
Yeah.
calls me to be there, I'm right here with you.
That's
I'll
right.
back
And
you up.
that definitely sounds like somebody who's been prepared for sure.
Yes, sir. You betcha.
Yeah. Love it. Who else? What else we got going on? Let me see. What's Mark talking about here? Mark's texting me. Oh, sleepy. It's almost his birthday. Um, what else? Based on some of the things, even from the last teaching, is there anything you guys had questions on? Anything you just wanted to share? Anything, you know? What do we got going on? There we go, Randy.
Um, on the point of being the ones that are left to work,
Mhm.
left behind, I haven't grasped that part of being left behind to work. Could it be that we are all called up, and the ones that are, you sit at the lower table, is to be called up? Could that be the ones that are going to be the workers to come back?
And that's actually good night, Cindy. Thanks for coming. That's actually a question I get regularly, especially lately. I've had it a little bit. Let me show you where my stance is and why. I'm open. Obviously, I'm open either way. But let me show you this right here. So in Luke chapter 14, you guys have seen this. It's the wedding feast, and then we have a great banquet. And the wedding feast is an event that lasts for 7 days from a marriage that has taken place. We don't see this in Mark, and then we do see one in Matthew, another wedding feast, but there is no banquet after it. The one in Matthew we know is for the Jewish one at the end. We know that this one, this one in Luke, is giving us a picture of the pre-trib. And so here's the pre-trib. The pre-trib is gone. This is that invite to sit down at the lowest room, in the lowest room. This is it right here. This is your calling to that pre-trib wedding. Okay. Now, then we have in verse 12 of Luke 14, we have the next parable, which is of the great banquet. And in the last video, I shared how after the 7-day wedding, you know, the bride and the groom, they stay in the chamber together. And then when the 7 days are over, then they come out and they have a great banquet. Now, in the Revelation, I have always understood it, and I've always seen it the way I'm going to explain. But I have people that often ask me, you know, is it possible that everybody is going to go pre-trib, that's supposed to go pre-trib, and then from those who have gone pre-trib, those remnant chosen would then be returned to the earth to be with the Lord for 40 days. And we know that that relates to this group right here. When he has this banquet, calling the feast, the poor to come and everything else, and that they would be recompensed in Luke 14:14 at the resurrection of the just. We know that this resurrection of the just is all about what we read in Revelation chapter 20, which is those who will take part in the first resurrection. These are those who didn't take the mark. They were beheaded for avoiding the mark and not taking it. These were the workers. Yes, there were others. There might be millions and millions that will be killed and beheaded during the time of seals. But this is a specific conversation to a remnant, the remnant group of workers from the bride. And how can we show this? Well, we saw that after the 7-day wedding, we have the banquet that he's going to have with a group that will go out and do this work, for which he says they would take part in the resurrection of the just. That's where the reward would be. And here we have those who were gone out during seals put their necks on the line. And it says, but the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. So who takes part in the first resurrection? All of that remnant group that were that will be part of that banquet after the 7-day wedding. And it gives us another clue as to who they are. Blessed and holy and he is he that has part in the first resurrection. On such, the second death has no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So they won't have to worry about the second death. It has no power over them. Well, excuse me, of course, again, that brings us to the Luke remnant group, as Ephesus relates to the apostle portion when they're going to be breathed on, and Smyrna represents when the Lord returns for his 40 days and connects to the Luke group. And what do we see about that? Well, he talks about, you know, they'd be in prison and suffer. Some of them will be killed, as it says. And then he says in Revelation 2:11, he that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. So we went from being able to see in Luke 14 that there was the pre-trib wedding picture. And then after the 7-day wedding, we know that there's a banquet. and seeing that those that are a part of that banquet that go out and do this and bring the poor and everybody else and the blind will be recompensed at the resurrection of the just. And we see that those who take part in the resurrection, which is the resurrection of the just, are those who put their necks on the line and will be resurrected to reign with them for 1,000 years and won't be hurt by the second death. So now we have a clue that they're also a group connected to Smyrna. And all of this is showing us that it's connected together, which means the pre-trib group and the remnant that are chosen from them, they're all living right now on the earth as the pre-trib bride being ready to be taken. And then there's going to be a group from among them that are going to be chosen to serve the Lord, at least during the time of seals. Now, when we go to Luke chapter 12, because when we saw it in Luke 14 here, we see the wedding and then we see the banquet. It would almost be like what you were saying, and others have asked me, is it possible that we would all go and then there's the 7-day wedding, they come out of the chamber and they have a banquet with just the workers, and then the workers go back with the Lord to begin the 40 days. And as much as that would be awesome, well, it would also seem then we have immortal bodies already. So that for that reason, it doesn't seem to line up for me either, because then that would mean our bodies would be transformed because we'd be taken to the third heaven. We'd be part of the wedding. We'd be up there for a week. Then he would have a banquet meal for us after the wedding, which, well, that doesn't make sense because he just had the banquet with everybody else. And we know, or the wedding feast with everybody else, whereas this is a feast, a banquet, sorry, that's only for the remnant workers. So why would he suddenly have that with them up there? And even, like I said, even more so, it would be then we were transformed and then returned, which means we would have these, the resurrected bodies. Never having tasted of death, we would come back. I mean, how would we die? I don't know. It's just, is it possible? It might be possible, but I haven't been able to find anything in Scripture that would confirm that. But you guys all know this from Luke chapter 12. Starting in verse 35, let your loins be girded about and your lights burning, and you yourselves like unto men that wait, right? That wait for their Lord when he'll return from the wedding. So clearly he's telling a group of people who are his little flock to wait for him when he returns from the wedding, which instantly tells you that this group isn't gone to the wedding with him, but that he has forewarned them to be ready when he returns from the wedding. And when he returns from the wedding, he's going to sit down, those who open to him, he's going to sit down, come and serve them and eat with them. Well, this is the wedding banquet that happens after the 7 days on the 8th day. And we see that they didn't go to the wedding with him. So for those reasons, I forgot to share the screen. Nobody told me I wasn't sharing the screen. Come on. So I was in Luke 14, as you guys know. Then I went to Revelation chapter 20, where we see the resurrected group. And then I went to Smyrna in Revelation chapter 2, where it says those are the ones, right, who aren't hurt by the second death. We know that that's the Luke group. And when going to Luke chapter 12, so maybe let me share my screen again real quick. That would explain why I didn't see you guys in the window beside me. So this is that key place, though. So when it comes to, are we going to be taken with the pre-trib and then come back with them? I haven't been able to find any evidence in Scripture for that, but I have found evidence in Scripture to say that they're not going. And so knowing that they are the group who will take part in the resurrection, who are going to have that meal, that banquet meal after the wedding. So if that banquet meal after the wedding is in heaven, then they've already received these transformed bodies, and then they come back with these transformed bodies. then when they put their necks on the line and they're being rewarded with these resurrected bodies to rule and reign with them, well, they've already had them. It's like, well, now we just get to do it again. So it doesn't really jive. What we do see is what I just verbally went through in Luke 12:36 and 37, where he's telling them to wait when he returns from the wedding. So at no place have I found a group going like that and then coming back. I haven't been able to find it in 7 years, but I have found a group that would be waiting. We know they're connected to the end of Laodicea. We know that they're Smyrna. We know they'll put their necks on the line. We know they'll be resurrected for the resurrection of the just, which means they were the ones taking part in the meal when he came back from the wedding, and then he sat down and served them and so forth. So I think it would be super awesome. I think it would be so cool, obviously, to go pre-trib with everybody and to come back with the Lord. But I haven't found anything that shows that. It seems we're waiting. I don't know if we're just sitting in our homes freaking out for 1 week waiting for the Lord to return, or if something happens. I'm not sure, but it looks like we're staying for the 1 week. Who's Paul? Oh, we got a new brother, Paul, that's jumped in. Any other questions or just things people want to share? Any concerns? Uganda, we've got our brother in Uganda. Steve, always ups and downs over there, reaching so many people, getting so many Bibles and books and the church that they built and all of these things that they're doing. I mean, that guy is going practically 24/7 over there. And you want to talk about somebody being prepared for sure. He'll already know where to get running when he gets going. But lots of stuff going on over there. They were just in the Congo a week or two ago. Very, very dangerous over there. They got there a little bit late, so people had already started to head out because you can't hang out there too long. I think there's Boko Haram groups and stuff over there with things taking place again. And so it's challenging going there and setting up stages and a bunch of Christians coming out and trying to share more stuff with them. So, we always pray for them and we support them and we do what we can to keep that going. So it's going strong and he's doing well even in the ups and downs of it all. But always worth it, and I know he wouldn't change it for anything, just like us, right? So what you got, Keith?
I'm not sure if you want to get into it or not, but I'm curious about your thoughts of Brother Ivan's fractals, his additional fractals, and how he, well, here's my question. I don't understand the barley harvest. So if Jesus, the first fruits, I don't understand who's the main harvest of the barley and who the corner and gleanings of the barley.
In relation to what Ivan has done, we talked about it. Him and I spoke about it in a Zoom host maybe a few months ago now. And I don't think he had it quite fine tuned. I wasn't quite seeing it. And I wasn't getting it. So I had kind of just set it aside. But he had sent me some private messages that I've got to go look into. With certain messages that come in, I can answer sometimes a little bit more quickly. With others that I know I'm going to have to go and I have to spend hours in and study, it takes me a little bit longer to get to. So just know that with everybody, I get all of the emails and all of the comments and these posts and everything. And some will take longer to get to than others because I know some, it's not just bang, I can go in and respond. Some of them, I have to look and see what else they're finding. And sometimes bang, great stuff comes from it. And other times I don't see it. Excuse me. So with Ivan stuff with that additional fractal of weeks, I'd have to look at more into it. And I think there was something else he might have recently shared too. But I'm not saying I agree with it or disagree with it yet. I need to spend more time. In relation to the barley harvest, let me show you something. This is how I personally, because we have to remember the barley already took place in the is, right? When the pre-trib happens, so when the pre, the mid, and the post all take place, they're all going to take place in the is to come. The pre takes place right at the beginning of the is to come, obviously. The barley and what Jesus did took place in his time. So Jesus is the first fruits. He was the first fruits for barley, which means there had to be a barley harvest connected with Jesus, right? There had to be. Well, the way I had always seen it was like this. When we go to Jesus and the crucifixion, we all know that Jesus' death, taken on the 14th. So let's play that out on a calendar. So Jesus, so the 14th, so the way it works, right, with the Jews calendar, the 14th starts on the evening of the 13th, which means when he went to have the Passover meal, they went on what we would say for us on our Gregorian calendar, the evening of the 13th of Nisan. And he has the meal. They go up to the mountain to pray, which is, again, this is on the 14th of Nisan because it goes evening to evening, right? So it goes like this. So they get the Passover meal prepared and they go and have the Passover meal. Passover meal is done. And Jesus goes, in Matthew's gospel, we see, goes up to the mountain to pray, and they're watching from the distance and so forth. Then he comes down. Judas comes with those that are with him, and they take him. This is just a few hours after the Passover meal. They take him. He's put in prison. He's spit on, everything else. And then the next day in the morning, he's now taken to be crucified. He's crucified, what is it, 9 to 12 a.m., I think it is, or 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., I think it is. He's crucified, and that's happening on the 14th. But he has to be taken down before what? Well, he has to be taken down before sunset, because the 15th is what? Now, this is where people have gotten twisted over the years, because the 15th of Nisan is a high Sabbath, right? But it's also a Sabbath. So this is where people have got mixed up in counting their Sabbaths. When you understand it's the 8th, 15th, 22nd, 29th, it becomes so crystal clear all the way through, every single month. And so what happens is he was crucified and had to be taken down, and was taken down, wrapped, and put in the grave before sunset on the 15th of Nisan, which to us would have still, it would have still looked like the 22nd of, what are we, of April of this year. So now he's in the grave, and he's completely in the grave for this day. So he was a little bit, maybe a couple hours, I don't know exactly, before sunset on Passover. He's completely in the grave for the entirety of the 15th, and he's in the grave for the evening of the 16th, and then early in the morning, very early in the morning on the 16th, was his resurrection. So we know the total from when he was taken into the hands of sinful men, in the evening of the 14th portion after the Passover, until his resurrection early in the morning on the 16th, was about a total of 2.5 days. And we were able to reveal that in Luke chapter 24. It shows it so clearly. It was awesome. Now, what happens is there's Jesus' resurrection, and we would call that the first fruits of barley, right? So everybody would say there's Jesus' first fruits of barley on the 16th. And of course, that makes sense with Leviticus, because Jesus is the first fruits of the feast of first fruits, right? He's the 7225 of the Hebrew. So he is the beginning. But then what do we see? If we go back into Matthew, and this is where the way I had always understood the rest of the barley story is at the resurrection. So we've got the crucifixion, and then we get the resurrection. And what do we see at the resurrection? Am I in the right spot? Too far? Yeah, right here. So then what do we see at the resurrection? This actually brings up some very, very interesting things. I haven't been able to reconcile this because it's about barley, so I don't put too much focus on it. But you guys will remember me. I mentioned it in passing year and a half. I mean, time flies and slows down. Year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, where maybe even a year ago, when I recently, in a study, realized that there is actually a group of people that say that the resurrection doesn't happen at the beginning of the barley, but at the end of the barley harvest. And I couldn't agree with that. But when you go to the count that we now have in our current day, and we understand that we have to begin in Taurus, in Savan, to be at the beginning, it seems very interesting because from that count of the beginning of putting the sickle to the winter wheat and starting the true 7 Sabbath count, that would seem to say that, shouldn't that be the end of the barley? Well, it is the end of the barley. It is the end of the barley. That should start putting bells off in our head that what is there with the barley harvest that we still haven't understood? And because for me, that whole thought is already things done. So I don't spend too much time trying to dig into what that could mean. Because when we see this with Jesus's death and resurrection, if he's the first fruits, which he was, of barley, which he was, because he is the feast of first fruits, well, then we got those that resurrected. So in Matthew 27, we see, and behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom, and the earth did quake, and the rocks rent, and the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose. Okay? And came out of the graves after his resurrection. That's pretty wild, right? Everybody, you read that story and you're like, what? Yeah, and they went into their cities and, they lived out the rest of their lives. That sounds wild. What do we know about this prophetically? We don't read about it in Luke. We don't read about it in Mark, but we read about it in Matthew. Why? Because this is that prophetic picture of what we were just talking about a moment ago, that Smyrna group that will take part in the resurrection of the just. This is a prophetic picture of them at the return of the Lord, feet down on the Mount of Olives. But what was it back in those days? Well, if Jesus was the resurrection of the first fruits of the Feast of First Fruits, which is barley, and there's a resurrection of a group of people, then it would strike me that this would be the harvest for the barley. All right? That's what I always understood it to be. That this would represent, in the is of what took place, the resurrection of the barley. So what we see in this is that right around the time of Jesus's resurrection, I don't know, what is it, moments later, then you have the resurrection of this other group. Well, the question then is I'm sure what you're asking, Keith, and what got you thinking about this as well, is the question has to be, well, wait a second. If this is the beginning of the barley harvest, and Jesus is the first of the first fruits of the barley, who are everybody else in this barley type resurrection taking place? Why are they also at the beginning of barley? You see what I'm saying? Jesus is the first fruits of the barley harvest. So there's Jesus's resurrection. But right at Jesus's resurrection, what happens? The graves open, and there's a resurrection of the other people, which I would deem, I always looked at them as being the resurrection of the barley portion. So if they're the resurrection of the barley, why did they get resurrected moments after Jesus? Because the barley harvest doesn't end until about the time frame that the winter wheat begins. What's brought into the house of the Lord first? The first fruits of the Feast of First Fruits. You don't bring in all the barley, right? But yet the rest of the barley was resurrected there. So you see, what that does for me is it starts to make me wonder, as other people have thought that I mentioned earlier that I haven't gone looking into. I heard about and I thought, I've never ever heard of that before, which is that there's a group of people that believe that the true time frame of where the events of barley take place is at the end of the harvest. And the end of the barley harvest would be over here. And then you would have the beginning of the wheat harvest. So is it like that? Why would these people believe that it should be over here? Now, obviously, just about everybody on earth believes that it's over here. Like 99.9%, you would say. But 99.9% would tell you that Shavuot's here, which is impossible because there is no wheat that's all completed its harvest. So, it seems weird for people when we tell them the end of the seventh Sabbath of the wheat harvest is here. But we can literally prove it with events going on the earth. So is it that people in our day that do believe it should be over here for the barley are believing it because the sun is off by 2 months? Should it actually still be connected to here? And that's why the Lord revealed to us the count beginning from the 16th where the wheat starts harvesting? I don't know, because the reality is the wheat does, the barley does begin here. So if the barley begins here, then the end of the barley is here, but we see the picture of the first fruits of the barley and then the rest of the barley being resurrected at the same time. So you see, to me, it's very murky still in trying to understand all this stuff with the barley. But it is at least somewhat clear enough to me to say that the barley portion is over, that the barley's done in the events that took place in the time of Christ, and that in the end it begins with wheat, and the evidence is in the revelation of Jacob with Leah and Rachel. That's one of the evidences.
And that resurrection in Matthew is not the first resurrection. That's a totally separate resurrection.
What do you mean? So the one in Matthew 27, you talking about these guys?
Yeah, the one you just showed, that's not considered the first resurrection.
Well, yeah, exactly, right? So you've already got this group that was resurrected. But then we go to Revelation chapter 20, and what does it tell us? Those who take place in the first resurrection, right? Wouldn't this seem like the first resurrection? Right? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would seem like the first resurrection. So is it only these guys then that get well, no, because they were already resurrected. The ones in Revelation chapter 20 is right before the millennial reign starts, when Satan's been killed. Right? So was Satan defeated here? He was, wasn't he? Satan was defeated in what Christ did, right? So you've got this wrapping storyline, that this fractal that keeps playing out. And so what we're seeing here is this prophetic picture of when Christ does it again. And when Christ does it again and he resurrects, what does it say in Matthew? Immediately after the tribulation of those days, which is again right after that 3.5 days, and he resurrects in the again, and he returns feet down on the Mount of Olives immediately after. And what happens? The first fruits of those who put their necks on the line take part in the first resurrection. So I would say this was definitely a first resurrection, but it was a first resurrection before the Spirit came, right? And then we have the Spirit, and then there's going to be the first resurrection. So it's this fractal that just keeps going and going. Well, eventually it will end, but it's this fractal that's replaying and gives us the revelation of why it's not in Luke, why it's not in Mark, and why it's in Matthew. So sometimes when we read in Matthew, I mean, I've said this before, that it can almost seem like some of these events didn't actually take place yet. It's so prophetically laced in what we've come to reveal and understand that it almost seems like, did this actually already happen yet? or is this telling us about an is to come? Now, we know it has happened, and the timing of this one was because it was before the Christian age, really, right? Because it wasn't until after his death and resurrection and then the Holy Ghost. So from the Holy Ghost forward, then we've got the Gentile age, if you will, from the Holy Ghost forward. And what happens at the end of that age? You got those who have put their necks on the line, and what do they get to be a part of? The resurrection of the just. So clearly, the one in Revelation chapter 20 is the end of tribulation at the end of the 13th year and the start of the 14th. But its picture is given to us right here in Matthew. So in relation to barley, I've always looked at this from the is and said Jesus is the first fruits of the barley, and this was the resurrection of the barley. And in the is to come, we know Jesus is what? Well, Jesus is the first of the first fruits. And then we've got the other first fruits that are with him that get to take part in his glory, who will sit with him, right, in his throne as he sits in his Father with his. And they're going to be what? The first fruits of this group that will put their necks on the line and so forth. So one looked like it was barley in the is, and this other one is wheat. And so a crystal clear answer for barley, I don't have, but it's there. It's just because of the sun being off by 2 months. Is it really still over there, or should it have really been over here? And when we put it over here 2 months later, well, we end up at exactly where the count should be in relation to wheat. So it seems like in our day, it should be at the end, not at the beginning. And there are people, it turns out, that say it shouldn't be at the beginning, it should be at the end. And if you put it at the end, you end up in Taurus, 15th to the 16th day. You see? And then you get an exact Leviticus count from Feast of Weeks now. So the sun has confused things, having gone off by 2 months. But at least we don't have to worry about this this portion with barley anymore. Thank goodness. I haven't been able to fully solve that one. But I mean, we've seen Wayne, what is it, Overcomer channel?
Yeah.
And he often talks about, we're the barley. I haven't found anything that shows that we're the barley. And in fact, if everything is actually going to happen this year, then we're obviously not the barley, because everything barley portion time is over. And when we go to if we go back to Jacob with Leah and Rachel, it's clear we're not barley. There's 2 wheat harvests, right? And that's part of the mystery. I think very few people realize that there's 2 wheat harvests. Very, very few people have understood the difference between a winter wheat and a spring wheat.
You think the 24 elders are from the barley harvest?
The barley harvest in Matthew 27 there.
Aren't there 24 elders already there in heaven?
Yeah, there's 24 elders already in heaven, and we know that they relate. So even if you remember this from 1 Corinthians, right? Is it first? Yeah. First Corinthians 15. In 1 Corinthians 15, this was a mind blower when we came across this, right? Starting in verse 4, and Jesus rose again the 3rd day. And then in verse 5, after that, he was seen of Caiaphas, then of the 12. After that, he was seen of above 500 men at once, of whom the greater part remain unto this present day, but some are fallen asleep. After that, he was seen of James, then of all the apostles. And last of all, he was seen of me also, one born out of due time. This, of course, is Paul. Well, wait a second. That means that after Jesus' resurrection, he met with the 12. Who are the 12? The world will tell us it's the apostles. Nope, because after the next group, and then after that, he met with the apostles, which means the people that were following him, there weren't only the 12 apostles. There were 12 of the apostles, there were 12 of the tribes, and there was a group of others that were following them as well. And we see by the term after that, after that, after that. And what did we come to understand? In the end of days, it goes in reverse. That's the Luke group, the pre-trib being taken. Then you've got the apostles going out. You've got the representation of the end of Mark's group, which is the 144, the larger group. And then you've got the 12 tribes. And the 12 tribes are the ones that go out during the millennial reign. So this was, I've always found this really interesting when we first came across it. It blew my mind looking at it, and never mind forward, but going again and seeing it in reverse, because the one born out of due time is, of course, the pre-trib connection, right? Like Isaiah 66:7. Before she travailed, right before she gave birth, she brought forth. So Paul is showing us himself here as a type of the pre-trib before the apostles, the 144, and then the 12 tribes that go out during the millennial reign. So I say that to say the ones that resurrected in Matthew's, I don't believe they were obviously not the 12 apostles, and I don't believe they were the 12 tribes either. Because what we see is the ones that were resurrected, I believe, were all of those that believed Christ was the Son of God, but they died before having had the opportunity to receive the Holy Ghost. And I believe that's why they were resurrected, to have that opportunity to receive the Holy Ghost. But what does this mean in the end? Well, we also know in the end of days, there's going to be the apostles again. And at the end of the 14 years, when the 12 tribes go out, we know that they're the gates through which everybody's going to enter during the millennial reign. And these 12 tribes are going out and doing their things during the millennial reign. So it's like there's 24 and 24, right? So there are the 24 in heaven. There's going to be another 24. And are any of them the ones that took place in that resurrection that took place in the is of Jesus' resurrection? I would say no. I don't think any of them were.
I remember you talking about that piece of giving them the opportunity to receive the Holy Spirit. And it's not like I have to understand it. I just want to.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
yeah, I know that he's good and he's so
it's really interesting. I've always like I just said, that seeing that there were 12 and 12. All church life, and no matter who you listen to, it was always just 12. And then you read that and you find out that there were 12 and 12, and then a whole other group of people. That was so surprising, but we had already had the revelation of the Gospels and the different worker groups at the end of Luke, at the end of Mark, at the end of Matthew, and we already understood. And then, of course, the John group, that it all made sense and it was all there in order. And it was all there in Revelation, 21, when we see the 12 tribes, the 12 apostles, and the 144 is the walls. And then you say, well, where's the Luke group? And we know the Luke group are the ones that ruled with them as kings and priests for 1,000 years. So you've got all four groups there, and you've got all four groups pictured in that resurrection story of meeting with this group, then this group, then this group. It's truly incredible. And it really expands and opens on things that we thought we knew from everything we were taught. But when you start studying the scriptures yourself, and in the revelations of these things, man, is it exciting. And it's changed, I would say, everybody that's a part of the ministry in one way or another. It has changed all of our lives. It's obviously changed mine, but what do? We're more excited to seek him in his word. We can understand as we're reading, we're catching nuggets, we're passionate about digging and drawing in closer to him and being like Enoch, right? It makes such a difference. It's so beautiful. Can't wait to see what he has for us next. Well, is it going to be a short, easy one here tonight, guys? We had a good little gathering here. People did some sharing. Michael, any questions? Anything anybody else wants to share? You guys can unmute now if you want. What about you, James? You got anything, brother? No, we're good. All right. Well, with that, that made it one of our shorter ones in a while. So with that, guys, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sharing. Nice to meet some of you guys. Michael, you know that you've been around for a while, and it's always nice to see new faces and to talk to people that have been around for a while that I've never met. So that's great.
It's great to be here.
Appreciate it. Welcome again, Randy. Thank you, Keith, for jumping on as well. Thank you, James. Everybody else that was on, I appreciate it. And man, it's gonna be a wild week, I'm sure. So with that, God bless you all. Thank you, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.